If you had asked me on my bingo card for 2024 if Dr. Phil was going to be the most based person on TV, I would not have guessed that, but here we are. This video shows Dr. Phil basically going in on one of his guests about DEI, and he has some other people on that are really good as well. So I've broken down the clips for you so you can watch it. Without further ado, take a look at the first clip.
Let me ask you, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is the definition of equity?
Great question, and I think we confuse equity with equality. And equality means that everybody is treated the same. And equity means that we need to look at, for example, there's a great visual of a short person and a tall person, and they're both looking over a fence, and they have the same block to stand on. And the tall person, of course, can see over the fence, but the short person has not been lifted up enough to see over the fence. And so when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're talking about the fact that some demographics come to the table and have to overcome racism, unconscious bias, misogyny. And so how do we help level the playing field for everyone?
Okay, so that means you're trying to create equality of outcome. Mm-hmm. That's what I hear you saying about playing God. Yeah. How do you create equality of outcome when people aren't the same? You're right. Some people are shorter, some people are taller looking over that fence. They can't both play in the NBA.
Right.
You can't create equality of outcome. What gives a DEI program the right to come in and try and alter the nature of things to create equality of outcome? That's been tried. That didn't work. That was called Marxism.
It really is playing God. That's what she's asking for. And when you say it out loud, you realize how crazy it is. And her example is actually a really accurate example. She could have used a lot of other things, but she used the perfect example to show how crazy her argument is, which is height. That's something that is in nature. So what you're basically saying is that DEI is there to subvert nature, and that regardless of your natural gifts and talents, you should not be able to succeed. And by the way, that has nothing to do with sexuality. It might have a little bit to do with gender. It also might have to do a little bit with race. But let's be clear, that doesn't change your inherent worth as a human being. Just because the average black guy might be able to, might be a little taller than the average white guy, and therefore he's going to be able to play basketball, does not make black people suddenly better than white people. Just because on that bell curve, it's been shown very often that many white populations have higher IQ than other populations, or higher Asian populations have higher than certain African populations. Doesn't mean that they're better people. It just means that they have merit in areas that other people don't. And we should stop being so afraid of that. One of the things that I really love, and you're going to see it in this next clip, is that Dr. Phil brings on some really awesome people of color, some black folks, to talk about DEI. And here's the thing. I reject the idea that your skin color suddenly makes your argument more powerful, but I will say it's perfect to use against this stupid leftist ideology because basically what she's saying is that black people should have a more of a argument or more of a say on these topics than a white person. And so when you bring out black people that give this very conservative response, there's literally a pastor here, so he's very conservative, she has screwed. She has screwed herself because of her ideology, because she cannot now say that he's wrong because she's the white lady. Now, I don't believe that, but she does. And so she's literally screwed herself. And I think it was really smart for Dr. Phil to bring these two guests on specifically that I'm going to show, because of how it just silences her completely. Really quick, before we get to the video, I do want to talk about the partnership of this podcast, the sponsor. It is the History on the Rocks podcast, guys. It's important to know history if you're going to understand politics, and luckily the History on the Rocks podcast does it in a really entertaining way. I highly suggest you go check them out on any place that you watch podcasts or listen to podcasts. They're doing kind of a multi-part series on the horse soldiers mission in Afghanistan. It's really fantastic. You should go take a look. I just cannot endorse their podcast highly enough. Super entertaining, but also super influential and informative as well. So go take a look. Again, that's at the History on the Rocks podcast.
Yeah. Well, a few things. If DEI works anywhere, it has to work everywhere. Let me tell you where DEI does not work. The NBA and the NFL. Where are the Asian Latino, and Hispanic basketball and football players? Where are the black guys in the National Hockey League? Those businesses are performance-based. It really comes down to, Dr. Phil, the issue of justice. And if you really want to go deep to the heart of this, and when I say that DEI treats the symptom but not the sickness, America is in a new civil war right now. The first civil war was the North versus the South. The new civil war is a war of ideologies concerning justice. And it's really going to come down to who gets to define what justice is, whether that's biblical justice or social justice. When moral law stands alone and DEI initiatives are based upon that, somebody gets to pretend that they are God.
And this is exactly right. What he says at the beginning is kind of what I was alluding to before the video, which is that, you know, just because I am white doesn't mean I deserve to be in the NBA. This is actually a point I made to one of my professors once, and he told me that I was wrong. But in any case, just because I'm white doesn't mean I get to go to the NBA because they don't have as many white players in the NBA. And the same goes for Asians and Latinos. The reason why there's so many black players is because they're freaking good at basketball. And that's never going to change because they actually understand, because they're a merit-based company, the NBA is, and all companies really should act that way because then they'll be as successful as the NBA. But what he says here at the end is even more important. And I've said this so many times, and I've talked about it in my book, the one right there. If you don't believe in God, you will just create another God. And oftentimes that is yourself. And that's what happens with DEI. It really is a battle of justice. You have a whole group of people saying that God exists, God is very aware of what's going on, and that you're trying to make yourself God. And the other people are saying, we can do whatever we want. We can make the short people taller. And that is just, and whether you believe that or not, it's not true. And when you follow untrue things in your life, misery follows. So I think this point by, you know, Pastor James Ward Jr. was absolutely fantastic. But the craziest part of this interview is coming up, and I'm going to show that clip right now.
You thought black students should be taught standard English. Talk about that.
Well, that took place on a listserv in my field of rhetoric and composition, which is better described as woke studies at this point. And I'll be happy to come back on the show and explain that one day.
Okay.
But what I said was, I was pushing back on the idea, the almost universal idea, that teaching standard English to black kids was a form of racism because you're asking them to speak white. I, as a pragmatist, say, well, you're giving them tools so that they can go out into the world and be happy, successful, and fulfilled. They're not replacing it however they talk. They're adding standard English to however they talk. But that was not received well.
So this guy literally suggests that he just teach people English, like grammar, and now that's a racist thing to teach people grammar. And you can't make this stuff up. This is why liberals, who are kind of classic liberals, members of the Democrat Party their whole lives, are starting to vote Republican. Because what you're seeing is the radical ideas of progressivism is taking the natural path that it was set out to take. These Marxist ideas are going down the road, and the further down the road that you get, the more you realize how crazy and unfulfilling this ideology is. They're saying math is racist. Now they're saying grammar is racist. They're literally teaching, he wants to teach people to speak better and to add more vocabulary and grammar onto what they already have. By the way, a member of their own race. It's not like this is some white guy, and I don't think it would matter if it was a white guy, but I'm just saying. And that's all he wants to do. And now he's being framed as a race traitor, which what does that even mean? Because who cares? Never once has a white person looked around and been like, you're a race traitor. That's an invention that progressives made up to make black people feel bad about being conservatives. Because, by the way, black people are the most conservative part of the Democrat caucus, like no question. And so they make up stupid terms like that and then tell you that math and grammar are racist. But it was awesome. I mean, this was one of my favorite moments of the show. The fact that Dr. Phil was based enough to bring in two guys and alongside him kind of go against this DEI HR lady. It was fantastic. And I would love to see more things from other celebrities like this. And I think we will, because despite there being so many crazies out there in Hollywood and entertainment, there are a couple normal people. And all normal people look at Marxism and progressivism and they know it's just a sham and it's just crazy. And so they reached a tipping point, which I think our country is certainly getting to, where you just look at yourself and you're like, I can't support this. And not only can I not support it, I got to speak out against it. And DEI is a perfect example of that. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you got a little bit of value or entertainment, please go down below and subscribe and comment and like what your favorite, tell me too, like what your favorite video was from the Dr. Phil interview and any other thoughts you have. We'll see you next time.